You do it. Get up. The basin's over there, but the patience, the love, this is the faith, this is the heart of God we're seeing. This is how he deals with us. Immense patience. So it's a lesson in humility, but also a lesson for them and for us to surrender the dirt, confess it, let him wash it. And then, when as I was going through this, just suddenly it occurred to me, and it blew my mind, at this stage, Judas is still sitting at the table. And for all we can see through this text, Jesus goes all the way around the table with this little basin of water. So at some point, he gets to Judas. He kneels down before Judas. He washes Judas's feet, fully knowing what Judas is about to do. Again, what Jesus knows when he does this should speak volumes to us of who Jesus is as we relate to him. So then Peter, eager to impress, even maybe eager to be a bit bossy here, even with Jesus, and far be it from church leaders to do that, replies to Jesus, Lord, then not only my feet, wash my hands, wash my head, Classic Peter, settle down. But in his reply to Peter, Jesus then throws out the first hint to the group that something is rotten in their midst. He's saying to Peter, the feet's enough. Then you're clean, and you are clean, Peter, but not all of you. And that must have been sort of the disciple must have looked around. What does he mean by that? Is that because he hasn't washed all of us yet, or is it what's the deal with that? He's going to tell people a bit more clearly in a second. So he sits down or lays down because they were sort of reclining in meals like this. And then he wants to make sure that they understand what he just did. So, do you know what I've done to you? And he kept teaching them to the end, and I love that. And then he just drives home the point clearly again to them. This is an example, I said to you. Show humble, self-sacrificing love to one another, just like the way that I have done it to you. And it's not just an example of the foot washing. It's also with what I'm about to do for you. And all these men right now, even though they don't come off very great here, do they? They're all going to, come back and show greatness for Christ. I think more or less all of them, at least most of them, will be laying down their lives eventually for him. So they will be actually heeding these words of Jesus. But it's 100% directly applicable to us as Christians again. Put on a servant's heart. Stop your hierarchical nonsense. A great example of this, I think, is the Colorado. It's one way of doing that. The out of their own pockets, they're coming over here, and they're just doing all the lowly tasks that we just don't have to do. And it's an incredible, very seemingly basic way to serve somebody, but it's powerful service, and it's the heart of Christ, even in things like that. And then he says, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is he who is sent greater than him who sent him. The point here is that Jesus, the master, obviously shows this self-sacrificing love to his servants. How much more should we as his servants? It's really the Lord's love language, isn't it? Self-sacrificial service. So look for ways to express that. And then he says, if you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. This really should be a caveat to the whole Bible, shouldn't it? It's both a blessing, a fact, and a warning rolled into one from Jesus here. And Bible-studying Christians like us, we're probably among the biggest experts in theological love. We know all about love, don't we? We know what it is. We know what it looks like. But blessed are we if we do love and act out this kind of self-sacrificing love. So Jesus is not done with this point yet. He's going to come back to it in a few more verses. But for now, this is sort of the big, powerful example that he set out. And then in verse 18, he continues, I do not speak concerning all of you. I know whom I have chosen, but that the scripture may be fulfilled, he who eats bread with me has lifted up his heel against me. Now I tell you before it comes, that when it does come to pass, you may believe that I am he. Most assuredly, I say to you, he who receives whomever I send receives me, and he who receives me receives him who sent me. When Jesus had said these things, he was troubled in spirit and testified and said, most assuredly, I say to you, one of you will betray me." Then the disciples looked at one another, perplexed about whom he spoke. So, again here, John wants us to know what Jesus knows. And Jesus now wants his disciples to know that he knows now that he's about to be betrayed. I think, perhaps because, and I think this actually makes a lot of sense, Jesus didn't want anybody, especially to think that when this betrayal starts coming into the full open, that this somehow surprised Jesus or took him off guard, or that maybe Jesus had made a mistake in picking Judas. He wants them to know this is fully according to Scripture. And I fully knew what I was doing when I picked Judas. And he quotes this from Psalm 41. This is the verse in Psalm 41:9 that Jesus quotes here, refers to. "Even my own familiar friend in whom I trusted, who ate my bread, has lifted up his heel against me." A familiar friend. And it says here, before he says this, that he was troubled in spirit. And then he drops that bombshell on the group. "One of you will betray me." And I just think it's great of John to let us know what Jesus is feeling as he's saying this. Because it's not like Jesus is, "Oh, I knew it. It was in Scripture. I knew it would happen. I knew when I picked Judas, and just go do it." He felt something very real about Judas. And he felt the betrayal, But the other really interesting thing is the disciples' reaction. Look at it. They looked at one another, perplexed about whom he spoke. And Matthew 26 adds that they were exceedingly sorrowful. And then they began to each say, "Is it I? Is it me, Lord, that you're talking about?" So they clearly did not have any special suspicion towards Judas. Because then it didn't say they all looked at Judas. It's, "Lord, is it me?" Actually, you should give him credit. That's the right reaction to have if Jesus just said something like that. Look inward, Lord, because they all knew probably that they would be capable of betraying him somehow. And they're all just, but you know what? Even Judas says that. And to me, that just, you or I can never see fully in the deep depths of a person's heart. Only Jesus can. And some people get so good at concealing sin, even in Christian communities, that they can fool all the Christians around them and even themselves. But you cannot ever hide your heart from Jesus. And that's not a warning thing. We should be happy that he will see it all, And he's just sitting there waiting for you to see it. He wants to show you some of the things he sees, again, so that he can cleanse you. But Judas looking up at Jesus saying, "Is it I?" How would that exchange have gone? So then they move on here, and the author, John here, he often refers to himself as the disciple whom Jesus loved. So we know now this is himself he's referring to. He's saying, they're laying around this table, and John is sort of reclined maybe right next to Jesus, so he's kind of like up against Jesus' chest. And it says here then that Peter, he must have then sat somewhere else around the table, sort of signals to John and says, "Ask him who the traitor is, because you're right next to him, ask him." This bombshell has just been dropped, and they're all like, who is it, Jesus? And then you see the dialogue now in verses 26